This is our cybersecurity career chat, so welcome to that. We had a casualty. One of our speakers bailed on us here at the last minute, but our best speaker, Charles Frick, did not bail on us. And I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, anyway, Charles, he's a senior staff at Johns Hopkins University in Applied Physics Laboratory, and he has a lot of experience in the cybersecurity field. I also just learned that he was a classmate of Dr. Bradshaw. Don't hold that against him. Do if you want to. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Charles, and I'll let you go ahead and kind of introduce and do your thing, and then we'll ask questions at the end.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kurt.
You're welcome.
So can everybody hear me okay? All right. So hi, my name is Charlie Frick. I'm a, like as you said, senior staff over here at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. We're outside of Baltimore, Maryland, kind of halfway between Baltimore and DC. And I've been working in the cybersecurity field for about the last 10 years. I've been at the lab for about 15 and done a few different jobs here. But I thought I'd take a minute and talk to you a little bit about how my career at Center led me to where I am today, and then just open up the discussion for some Q&A for those of you that are interested in starting off in the security field. I also will take the moment that I have a platform to beg every single one of you freshly new young voters to come out and exercise your civic duty today. If you have to drive an hour and a half to Louisville, drive it and go vote. Now, that said, way back in the dark ages, Dr. Bradshaw and I were here at Center in the mid-1990s, and I was a double major in mathematics and dramatic arts. So I like to mention that because you don't have to necessarily have a comp sci degree and background for, to take a career in this field. Now, I did have to learn a lot of things along the way, but as I talked to you about my particular journey, I just wanted to make sure to express that really the type of education that I got at Center was really critical, because as I went to grad school and went into a career, there were a lot of people that had more specialization than I did, but they were lacking a lot of other basic skills that I think Center really drives home. When you graduate from Center, you're going to find that you are much better at writing and frankly a lot better at critical thinking than what's taught at a lot of other universities. And those two skills, married with the ability to figure out what you need to do without somebody telling you every step along the way, are critical regardless of your field. And those are things that I think that really get fostered over there in Danville, and just can't say enough good things about it. It's meant the world to me. So as I was saying, back in the 90s, I was doing mathematics and dramatic arts, and somewhere around my late junior year, early senior year, I realized, crap, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, because I'm going to have to leave this place. And I wasn't really sure. And so I looked around, and one of the first things I did was look for internships. And that's played a critical role. I'll do a shameless plug right now, jhuapl.edu. Come look now. We have a lot of really, really good paid internships, not just in cybersecurity, but across all the sciences and engineering fields. This laboratory is about 6,500 people, and we do all sorts of work, primarily for the federal government, a lot of work for the Navy, the intelligence community, and NASA. Those would be the biggest groups that we work with. But we do tons and tons of really cool research. I'm a fan of the cyber work. We also do a lot with robotics, a whole lot with aerospace engineering, and we offer a really good intern program. And so take a look at it, and I highly recommend applying for it. It's a great program. We pay our interns the same rate that we pay our new graduate staff. So it's a really good paid internship at that rate, I should say. But anyhow, I was looking for internships, and working with the Career Services branch at Center, I found one with the Office of Naval Intelligence. And I did that in the summer between my junior and senior year. And that helped a lot for me getting exposed to different parts of the federal government and the Department of Defense and found that I kind of liked working in that area. But as I was getting ready to graduate, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go straight into a career. And the other big thing that I learned, I was a first generation college student. So a lot of things about higher education were frankly foreign to me. And one of the things I didn't realize until the beginning of my senior year was that, especially in the sciences and mathematics, you can basically go to grad school for free as long as you're willing to take a TA position. And so when I learned that, I was kind of shocked. And so I started applying to grad school. And I ended up going to Virginia Tech and got a master's in applied math. It was a great deal. I went there for 2 years, worked my butt off, and got my master's degree, and then each semester taught about 2 classes. And didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but you figure it out. And it was a good experience because I've also found that the central ideas in teaching, conveying complex concepts to a large audience, has also provided massive benefits throughout my career. But so like I said, I finished up my degree in math and theater at Center. Also want to do a plug again for if you have interest in the arts as well, always pursue them. My time in the theater department there was really precious to me, and also gave me skills that I use very frequently in my career path, because once again, most people are really scared to talk in front of a group of folks. I'm not, and a lot of that's due to the training that I got from Patrick Kagan-Moore, Matthew Halleck, Tony Haig, if any of you guys knew Tony. I know he just recently retired. But it's just that ability in itself will help you regardless of what you do. But back to the point, I went out to Blacksburg and got my degree at Virginia Tech, and also, most importantly, met my wife there. And got a master's degree and trying to figure out, well, what am I, kind of flash forward 2 years, and it's now what am I going to do? But I started interviewing and looked around at a lot of different fields. And the first choice I made was I took a job with as a civilian for the US Navy. And I worked in something called cost analysis. Basically, you try to estimate how much these massive DoD procurement programs cost, things like aircraft carriers, submarines. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I'd like it, and I didn't. And so that's another important thing I want to share with you guys. It's not like you're guaranteed to instantly figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the next 50 years and just start off to the races. Sometimes you have to figure your way through it. And I wasn't really sure. And so I tried working in the cost world. There's a lot of good stuff there, good jobs, but for me, it wasn't a great fit. And so I started looking to see, well, is there something that might be better suited? And I wanted an opportunity to do things where I was a little bit more technical and involved with the creation of some of these complex systems and kind of solving critical challenges. That led me to APL way back in 2003. I don't want to do the math because I know deep down, I don't want to know how young most of you guys were in 2003 when I started working there. Dr. Bradshaw understands. Anyways, so I came to the lab and I didn't start off doing cybersecurity work. I didn't really know that was something I'd want to do at first. I thought, well, what are some things I could do with a math background, understanding how to logically decompose a problem and find solutions. And I started off with actually wargaming. So I worked with a branch of our lab. They're called National Security Analysis Department, and did a lot of different research and studies with the Pentagon and folks out there where we would simulate and test different types of things that the military might have to do. Sometimes you're simulating a war, sometimes you're simulating humanitarian missions. And the reason you do this is you're trying to figure out what capabilities you might want to research and develop over the next 20 years. And so you do these type of tests and events to figure out what capabilities do we have and what do we need. And I did that for a little while and I enjoyed it. But one of the great things about here at the Applied Physics Lab is we're very diverse and you can try your hand at a lot of different things without much administrative effort. So I did the wargaming for a couple of years, but then thought I might want to, really dive deep into a particular, field. And so I started with submarines after that, no pun intended. And so I started researching and testing combat systems for Navy submarines. And I did that for about 4 years, where we would go out to sea and talk to the sailors, and we would collect data and instrument different systems and learn how they performed, and then start doing working with different developers to create new capabilities and develop out test plans to figure out how things worked and were they getting better with time, because you want them to. And that's one of the things that I really valued about my job here at the lab, because at its core, APL is what's known as a trusted agent for the US government. What that means is the government pays us to tell them the truth. There's a lot of money at stake for these Department of Defense budgets. The defense makes up over 50% of the discretionary spending of the US budget. And so when people are spending that much money, a lot of times the developers of these systems have a vested interest in getting more funding and keeping them going. And unfortunately, it's not always about how well things work. And that's where my lab comes in. We've, over about 75 years, developed a strong relationship with the government as an area of technological expertise, where we're able to test, identify, and find out how well certain things are performing. And also, with us being a not-for-profit organization, when we find a problem that isn't really economically viable for the private sector, we go off and we start doing research and development to build new systems. And so we've done that a lot over the years. Don't need to get into a big history lesson of APL for you, but I enjoyed that type of challenge where I could actually come in and make a difference and say, talk to the Navy and say, I know you think this capability is, really, really great. However, we put it in the lab, we tested it, and it only worked 5% of the time. And so we're going to recommend that you don't buy it. And they listen to you. And that's a really powerful thing to do. And it's one of the reasons I've stayed here for so long is you really can make a dramatic difference and help make things a lot better. I will do a plug for the lab, just describing not just, submarines and things like that, but one area that we saw being a big challenge, say about 10 years ago, was had to do with prosthetics. Not trying to be too morose here on a Tuesday morning, but at the height of the Iraq War, a lot of our soldiers were coming back as amputees. And that's, first of all, that it's horrible that happens, but we also were looking at the quality of life that these soldiers were having. And frankly, prosthetic arms weren't very advanced, even in the mid to late 2000s. And from the military's point of view, that was also a big challenge, because when they think about training, so the military spends hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per human being to train them for a job. And there were people that all of a sudden weren't able to do their jobs anymore because they had lost an arm. And so the goal was, the DoD group called DARPA said, we want to create a prosthetic arm that weighs no more than a human arm, contains its own power, and provides all the strength and functionality of a human arm, period. And there was nothing at all like that. And no private industry by itself had enough funding to go and develop a thing like that. So that's where we came in and said, okay, well, we're not going to try and make a profit off of this. We're just going to see, kind of at cost, how can we find the best developers in all the fields of prosthetics, put them together, and build something new. And we actually were able to create a really fascinating thing called the modular prosthetic limb. You can Google it. There's some good footage of it. But basically, after many years of development and working with all the major people in healthcare, we came up with basically a cyborg arm. It's a arm that gives all the functionality of the human arm and can be integrated in with the nervous system. You still have a wearable computer to configure the thing, but it is light years beyond what the technology could do just 5 years prior to its existence. And it's one of the things I think is really amazing. Along with that, and trust me, this rambling of mine gets towards a purpose. I'm not just filling in for the other guy who didn't show up. But, we, here at this lab, we were able to, we don't just stop with one thing and think of things in a vacuum. So we built this arm. We started thinking, okay, are there other areas where people could use this technology? And we do a lot of work with warfare. And another thing that we were seeing was these things called improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. Think something like landmines, but remotely detonated. And a major challenge is, most of the time, a human has to put on a big suit, walk up, and try and take the thing apart without getting blown up. Well, and the reason is that they need, their eyes, their judgment, and you need the dexterity of your hands. Well, somebody had the idea, great, we just built a cyborg arm. Why don't we slap 2 of them on a small robot with some high-def cameras and drive that up there and design it so that a operator can put his or her arms into special harness and move the robot's arms just like they were his or her own arms. And so we built this thing called Robo Sally and sent that out there to help solve that mission. And so what I'm getting at is this type of place is special in that we get to keep trying to find new solutions to new problems. And so it was right around 2000, and I told you there was a segue that would start to make sense with why I'm here. Around 2009, I started looking around and thinking, what do I think's the next giant challenge we have? And for me, I thought that was cybersecurity. Now, I'm not a very good computer programmer. I'm not a very good hacker. I can get by, but I'm not great. But I looked at it and thought, more and more of our lives, and this was 10 years ago, but already a whole bunch of our lives is all connected to the internet. And it seems awfully easy to hack into things. And the truth of the matter is, it is. The core foundation of the internet was one based on trust. So systems by default trust each other. There's a thing called Border Gateway Protocol, or BGP. It's kind of the glue that makes the entire internet work. And basically it's based on one router saying, I am google.com, and everybody else believing it. And occasionally it's happened that something that's not google.com says, I am google.com, and everybody believes it. I guess it's now been about 8 years ago, I think it was, all of Google's traffic went through mainland China for about 15 minutes one day. And I kind of saw things like that and thought, boy, this is a hard problem. And so that's where I wanted to start getting involved. And the first thing I did was we set up a facility here to help bridge the cyber expertise that we were developing with different mission owners, because there was a big understanding gap with the federal government, with DoD, and with a whole lot of places at that time, where someone could describe an operational problem and people would respond. But when they put that in IT speak or InfoSec speak, people's eyes just gloss over and you nod and go, that's very interesting, and you ignore the problem. And people get hacked, and it keeps happening. And we needed to find a way to change that. So that's one area where my theater background here at the lab, mixed with my math background, made me an ideal candidate to start building out these technology demonstrations where we'd have actually filmed vignettes, we'd hire actors, and we'd film out different operational scenarios to talk about what's the impact of things getting hacked. Now, nowadays, that's not needed as much. I'm pretty sure every single one of you has heard something about a data breach at some time, right? Yeah, so I'll share my worst one. So I am a federally cleared DoD contractor as part of my job at the university. That means there's a place called the Office of Personnel and Management that holds a form that I had to fill out that has every address I've ever lived at, every job I've ever had, every school I've ever went to, has my fingerprints associated with it, has my financial history, and has my medical history. And that would include things like records of psychiatric visits. If I had any substance abuse in my past, that information would be on there, along with any other type of adverse information that someone could use to blackmail me. Well, my information, along with several million other people, was all stolen. All of that data, social security numbers, fingerprints, all your history, all of that was stolen in a data breach. And I'll never get that back. Now, and so that really kind of brings it home to me, at least. So lots of stuff is getting stolen, and we all realize there's a problem. But now it comes down to, what are we going to do about it? And so I started off with these demonstrations to get people familiar with it, and that led me to working on, okay, we now acknowledge there's a problem. How do we want to fix it? And so I started taking some of the ideas that I learned from math and applying them to a field called risk analysis. One of my favorite courses in math I took at Center, I don't know if they still offer it, but there was a game theory course. And I think Dr. Bradshaw and I might have taken that together. I'm not sure. Did you take Dr. Johnson's game theory?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I can't remember if you were in there or not. We were in abstract algebra. That's right. Sorry. Anyways, but starting to take some of the concepts from that course and applying it to how people associate risk to their networks got me to start working more closely with different teams and designing out more tests to basically assess what parts of a network are critical to your operations and how vulnerable are they. And so I would assemble teams of hackers to get together and look at different security controls and figure out how hard it was to break certain security measures, so that we could then kind of line that up against how bad is it when that thing gets broken. That let us kind of prioritize and identify what type of advancements and controls we want to do. And I did that for a few years. And that also led us to researching a few different prototypes. I looked at different ways to make sense out of the information on a computer network. And to do that, I started doing a lot of on-the-job training and learning more. Not just computer programming is important to understand how a lot of this works, but also concepts from computer engineering come in handy, as well as concepts from information technology. And that gets glossed over a lot in this field. Right now, the cyber career field is really vibrant in the US. We have about 200,000 more job openings than we do qualified candidates. So it really is a great field if you are interested in it. But one of the reasons we have that shortage is there's a massive knowledge gap. And so you have to, start taking some entry-level courses or, apprenticeships or mentorships and things like basic IT. So I had, an IP address was a set of 4 random numbers that some guy on the telephone told me before I started learning more into how do computers talk to each other. Why do IP addresses go from 0 to 255? And I had to start learning those things and then understanding, okay, beyond just the IP addresses, how do ports and protocols, how do computers pass data from one another to a network? That helps you understand, those fundamentals help you understand things like how firewalls work. It's kind of it's a multidisciplinary type thing, because you also start learning more about things like Linux and wanting to understand not just, what makes a Windows computer work, but what makes Linux systems work. How do they exchange data between themselves? And you start building those fundamentals on top of each other. That once you understand how they work, it's a lot easier to understand how they break. And that's when you start, taking that skill set and building on top of it, learning tools like computer network exploitation, and start studying things like Metasploit or the Kali Linux stack, which is a free open source set of penetration testing tools. Also, it's really critical to learn about the ethics involved in cybersecurity research and training. Far too often, people are way too reckless and end up either accidentally or knowingly committing felonies in the name of cyber research. And so I teach a summer workshop for high school kids to get them an introduction to ethical computer hacking. And one of the first things I always stress is you all have moral compasses and you know what's right and what's wrong. And trying to hide behind the mask of research doesn't really cut it. You wouldn't walk into somebody else's house to get a glass of water just because their front door was open if you didn't know them. And it's not okay to go steal their Wi-Fi just because they didn't put a password on it. And it's really not okay to go to somebody's website and start trying to launch different attacks to see if you can bring it down or break into it. Because regardless of the knowledge of cyber, everybody here's got a pretty good idea of criminal trespass and theft. But I was getting towards with all that is we need a lot of people in the cyber realm. And there's still a ton of challenges. Over the past year, I've been spending my time working with computer defense teams inside different corporations that make up U.S. critical infrastructure. So things like the financial sector, the power grid, water and sewer throughout the nation, dams, transportation, ports. These things are all owned by private industry, but the nation's critically dependent on them. So Homeland Security established these areas of critical infrastructure and wanted to find ways to help people respond and react to these attacks better. So I've been working with teams where we study the operators, and we've done a lot of research in the area of automating a lot of the security workflows, as well as how we securely share information about attacks with each other, because there is still a long ways to go. Often a company finds out about a cyber break-in between 1 to 300 days after it happened. And that's a big problem because most people who want to do something to you are going to achieve their goal within 100 to 300 days. And we want to get that down from months to milliseconds, really. And so we've been working with a kind of rising field in cybersecurity called SOAR, S-O-A-R. That's Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response, unless I butchered the acronym. But we've done a lot of work in that field where we've been doing pilots in large banks and areas like that, where we can start analyzing how are we responding to these attacks. And the truth is, we still manually do a lot of things. And you want a human to make key decisions, but you really want to look at how much of that human being's time is spent deciding things and how much is spent copying and pasting and looking things up in other tools. And we found really a whole lot of it spent doing the really menial, repetitive tasks manually, just because it's difficult to automate all of this. You need to have some of those programming knowledges, understand things like Python and PowerShell and Bash scripting. And that led to the rise of a kind of new branch of technology called security orchestrators, which are trying to connect up to all of these devices to make it simpler for people to build out automated workflows. And we do a lot of research now in learning how those things work and are connected, and start looking for best practices and get to really define the cutting edge of what's it mean to do this type of automated security, and what's the role of the human versus the role of the machine, and start thinking about things like, well, if I'm going to start putting a machine in the critical path, how do I build and maintain trust with that system? How am I going to make sure that it's doing what I want it to do, and I know when it breaks, the second that it breaks? And how do I know what I want to do to respond to that? And so that's stuff that kind of gets me up each day. I really enjoy doing it, and it's been a really good opportunity for me. And so that's me rambling for about 35 minutes on you. I apologize for that, but just wanted to show you how I kind of took where I started off, where you guys are right now, and kind of found my way through to land into what I think is a really exciting field. And I would be ecstatic to answer y'all's questions and on anything. If you're just wondering how to get started in this, what things to study, or any other question you've got, I'm happy to answer. So I open it up to you guys. Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear that, Charlie?
I couldn't hear it, I'm afraid. Could you repeat the question to me? Or?
The microphone's up there.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay. I was gonna ask, is your position right now considered a part of the corporate world?
I'm sorry. I apologize. It broke out.
But would you, she's wondering if your job is a corporate job. Would you consider
Oh.
yourself corporate?
I'm really more in the nonprofit sector. So officially, I am a faculty member of Johns Hopkins University. The lab is not, we're not a publicly traded company or anything like that. So I'm not pure academic though. I don't spend my days in lecture halls and doing doing research grants. I do a lot of contracts with the federal government most of the time. Occasionally I'll do some research here, but it's really more educational and R&D than it is pure corporate. I work with a lot of corporate folks though.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay, so I asked Matt so that I could ask you, just because I feel like nonprofit and corporate are pretty similar, like when you started off, did you not get everything that you wanted? Because I feel like I'm one of those perfectionists where I want my first job to be exactly the way, like I want all my skills to be used, you know? And I know you mentioned that not all your skills were used, but you learned to use them, but I don't know, I just feel like how do you battle not getting what you want the first time, especially when your time is what's being used up at the end of the job?
So it's difficult. As I was looking around, when I first started looking, I did look at some private sector jobs, and I looked at, private, public, and, each time you look at a new opportunity, there always are going to be trade-offs. And for me, at least, where I was at in Virginia Tech, the government options seemed to be a lot more open-ended, where it seemed like there were a lot more places where I could apply myself. And so that kind of attracted me towards that. Whereas in the private sector jobs, the nice thing is they offer more money. But I didn't necessarily want to be focused on one particular thing. At least it wasn't a thing that I was passionate about. So I didn't want that. If you do want to do things like work in insurance or, actuarial tables, I know plenty of people who have enjoyed that greatly. It just wasn't what I wanted, or, I couldn't find a company that I was that passionate about. I've seen some since that I've, been very impressed with, but none that I really want to trade up what I'm doing right now because I have too much fun with what I get to do. But it's always a balance, and you just kind of look at what they're offering, but also you want to look at what they're willing to help foster. Because I think one thing I didn't really understand when I first started doing job interviews, I was thinking, I'm trying to sell myself to, this company. I want them to want to offer me the job, and you do. But you also have to really critically think about what they're offering you in return. Is this a position where I see advancement potential? Is this a place where I'm going to learn something? If you look at a job and think, oh, I can just do that in my sleep, it'll be pretty easy, and I can put in my 40 a week and go home, you probably can. And you're probably not going to get to do a lot more after that. And that's the type of thing you want to make sure that as you interview for a job, that you're really interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And because it's about finding that right fit for what you want out of your life and career. Does that help?
That does help, thank you.
Okay.
Were there any specific certifications that you took, or maybe online or in a course that helped you in your career today?
Questions about certifications, correct? Yeah. So there's a few. Now I'll confess, I don't have a lot. The only certification I currently hold is called CISSP. So it's by a group called ISC Squared. It's Certified Information Security Systems Professional. In my realm of work, it's kind of a standard cert that a lot of people require to have. I'll be honest, it doesn't do a lot to make you better at cybersecurity. I've audited a few courses on certifications and just haven't sat for the exams. Ones that I think are really good, CompTIA has really good Security Plus. They also have a good one called Network Plus that will teach you the basic fundamentals of some of the network communications. For actually breaking into computers, the best one that I've seen is called OSCP, the Offensive Security Certified Professional. It's I took that class, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I horribly failed the exam. Most people do. I haven't gotten around to taking it a second time yet. It normally takes a couple tries to pass that one. The final exam is you're given a VPN credential and told there's a network on the other end of this connection. You have 24 hours to take over as much of it as you possibly can. And after that, you have 24 hours to write a report on what you did, how you did it, and how you would stop somebody else from doing it. So it's a pretty intense, it's probably the most intense exam I've seen. Cisco has one way up there that's also pretty nightmarish, where they literally lock you in a network closet for 8 hours and say that there's a problem in here, go fix it. But I would say, yeah, the Sec Plus, Net Plus, OSCP, CISSP is normally a pretty needed one for certain parts of this field. Another one that shows up a lot is the CEH, the Certified Ethical Hacker. It's good, and I think that one's good on teaching the theory on computer exploitation. But honestly, there's a lot more just rising up right now in the certification field. I'd be remiss if I didn't also bring up the SANS Institute, SANS. SANS does a lot in this field. And an interesting thing that they do is they are an accredited university where you can create a master's program out of several of their certifications. And so that's really handy, especially one thing I should do another plug for. I went to grad school straight through, but places like my employer do a lot of programs where they will pay for all of your graduate work while you work full time. And that's very common in this field. So there's a lot of places that will do that. And so SANS is really one nice option where your employer might pay for you to do the master's degree. It might take you 3 to 4 years because you're working a full-time job while going to school. But you can do that and also pick up several valuable certs in that realm. Sure, whoever was next.
Did you take computer science classes here at Center? Or like how do you shift from like math to computer science?
So I'll confess, I only took the one computer science class that they, I think it was CS 11 at the time, but I just took the introductory computer programming course that all mathematicians take. And I code like a mathematician, and that's not a compliment. I'm really, really bad at it. A lot of my computer programming skills I've developed out of necessity and on the job. So I did a lot of MATLAB scripting when I was in grad school. But then as I started working in this field is when I really began kind of on my own time, starting to teach myself things like, and still I do more scripting than anything. A lot of bash scripting. I started learning more Python as more tools were starting to use that. Picked up enough Java to get myself in trouble and enough JavaScript to cause real damage. And so I've picked, basically, it's my belief that if you take some of your fundamentals in comp sci, but are willing to put in the time to really pay attention to the key concepts, you can pick up the languages pretty quickly. But I would say also I'm an outlier. Most of the people I work with had bachelor's or master's in computer science and had a very, very robust programming background. So I had to do more work to pick up that skill set. But a lot of the ideas from math translate pretty directly. It's still about logically breaking down a problem into smaller pieces and learning how to solve each piece towards a greater goal. But there are things that I still stink at. I'm a horrible abuser of for loops, and I copy paste my code a billion times more than any self-respecting developer should. I hear there are these things called functions, and you should use them. And it might explain why my code runs so terribly bad. And that's why I normally will go and assemble a team of people who are good at that to do that with me. Because the most common statement I make to folks around here when I have a development team together. I'm actually have a small dev task going on right now on the side is, okay, here's some code that I put together for an idea. I need you to do it in the way that's not horrible. And they'll take it and look through and like, why'd you do this? Just assume that I'm stupid. Do it better. And that's gotten me pretty far in life.
Any other questions?
I think there was another question in the back. I'm not sure. Okay.
Do you have some suggestion on some specific math class you think going to be? Do you have some specific suggestion on math class you think going to be helpful in the cybersecurity field?
Yes. So, first of all, one that I think is really handy to think about is actually a philosophy class, symbolic logic. I think there's some concepts there that really play out. Additionally, now, yeah. Is Dr. Wilson still teaching in the math department by any chance?
Wilson's still here.
Great. So this will be a plug for him, but I think abstract algebra is a critical one to pick up. The concepts that you get in there on how to really take pretty much any operation and put it into an abstract space, that skill set of taking a bunch of tools and turning them into something you know how to manipulate and getting them back to where they started from, that type of logic and rationale comes in really handy, independent of further math. Now, depending on what else you want to do, there's a lot that you can be done if you want to get into like the computer engineering and actually the modeling of how circuitry works. Like if you thought you might be interested in hardware security and design, I definitely think a lot of the differential equations is a critical skill set to have when you want to start doing things that are really deeply in the physics and electrical engineering. Also, complex analysis comes in really handy when you get into the engineering side of it. But aside from that, big plug for abstract algebra, symbolic logic, and if they don't offer a game theory course, I highly recommend pushing for them to do a specialty one. That's a really valuable thing to get exposed to. Statistics also is good to pick up because I work in an applied physics laboratory and I'm shocked on a regular basis how many people don't have a basic concept of statistics. By the way, not everything is a normal distribution, and you really shouldn't assume that with all data because it really leads to some inaccurate modeling. But yeah, but as far as the math side, that's what I would personally recommend.
What would you recommend on the drama side?
Drama side, well, Tony's not there now. I was going to say, I've kept Tony Haig's theater history course with me my entire life. You learn so much about, but theater history is fantastic. You'll learn a lot about not just the history of art, but really culture and how certain ideas and concepts get ingrained with a society and follow themselves over time. Also, I will recommend, any Patrick Kaganmore acting class is really good, and any, if he still does it, Matthew Halleck taught a stage management course that was fantastic.
Any final questions? No?
I get a lot of questions from students, and I've been sharing them with you, but they want to go to graduate school and learn about cybersecurity, or they want to go to industry. Could you talk about what those two paths might look like and where they might get them?
Sure, definitely. So a lot of the paths into the cybersecurity industry, I see a lot of routes. A lot of entry positions are starting off in tier 1 security operations support, which is a painful place to start, but that's where you're kind of frontline working with kind of as an offshoot of an IT help desk, where you're processing the alerts coming into an organization and trying to adjudicate them. Not to scare anybody here, but roughly 1 billion, on most sized networks, about 1 billion alerts get generated daily. That gets normally automatically filtered down to about 60 million or so that need to be sorted out. And so people start developing different types of filters and queries and analytics to try and parse that down. And your average analyst can probably get through about 60, 70 of them a day. So it's a heavy prioritization need, but there's a lot starting off in that realm for doing the defense side. There's also a lot of research openings in penetration testing. There's a lot of demand for that. So pen testing is where you'll be being hired to hack into a system and identify the vulnerabilities and identify security strategies. That can be a lot of fun. As long as you don't mind travel, you will be on the road 5 days a week doing that life. But there's a lot starting off there. A lot of it, looking for graduate programs in cybersecurity is one good route. Another one is going to a lot of the security conferences. There's often very good student discounts. I would definitely look up a series of conferences called BSides, BSIDES. There's hundreds of them. They're done locally all over the country. I am certain there are some in Kentucky. And there's normally a big hiring push at those. Also in your own backyard is one of the best security conferences in the industry. It's called DerbyCon. They just had it in October, but DerbyCon is one of the best hiring opportunities to get started in the cyber realm. But also applying for internships. There's tons of companies looking for security help. If you start just looking cybersecurity internships, there's a group called CyberWatch. They focus with education outreach. They can put you in contact with a lot of people hiring, but also you look at the conferences, start searching through InfoSec on Twitter. I'll be glad to, if anybody wants to contact, feel free to share my contact info and you guys can email me. I'll be glad to put you in contact with a few folks that are really posting a lot in this realm, but there's tons of openings all the time looking for people willing to, start and learn the way in. But, and then also getting master's degrees in security programs is a really good route to go. But I just say, honestly, right now, I mean, with a 200,000 person shortage, Google is your friend. There is a ton of opportunities sitting out there right now and applying for them. Also, like I said, internships with places like APL, MIT Lincoln Labs, MITRE, the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Cisco, FireEye. I'm trying to think of some of the other big players. Palo Alto Networks is doing a ton in this realm. Symantec and McAfee. All these folks are having very vibrant internship opportunities. Another local company here in Maryland that's worth taking a look at is called Tenable, Tenable. They have a fantastic college intern program that often leads to a lot of hiring opportunities. I like theirs a lot because their internship program makes you rotate through every type of job in the company. So you have security assessment, development, marketing, all the way through management that you do during the intern cycle, which I thought was a really cool approach. So you can get exposure to all parts of it. But honestly, you can look up the major security conferences, Black Hat, DEF CON, BSides, DerbyCon, RSA, and all of these conferences have a huge section on hiring and the job market because we are badly hurting for people. Another shameless plug, I'm happy to share, I think I gave to Dr. Bradshaw a copy of them, but my Intro to Ethical Hacking workshop, I distribute that information freely. So I have slides that I'm happy to give anybody. It's about 2 weeks, 20 hours of lecture that I do on that topic. So if anybody's curious about some of the basics and fundamentals, I'm happy to give you a copy of those. And with a little bit of finagling, I can get you a copy of some virtual machines to test and build your own lab with. But yeah, happy to point you towards that realm. But a lot of just work the career sites, work the job fairs, and work the conferences. The security conferences are the #1 place to learn about internship opportunities. And just go apply because it can't hurt, you know.
Any final thoughts or parting words?
Just, you know, it's okay to not know what you want yet. You know, I'm 40. I'm still figuring it out on a daily basis. And when I was 22, I had no clue I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. And frankly, there's degrees in cybersecurity now. In the year 2000, when I graduated, there were not. So don't feel that your degree is like a life appointment to a particular career. Think about the way that you've learned to think about problems and the way and the insights and approaches that your degrees have helped shape your focus and your view, and look at how you can expand that and, you know, bring it to other challenges, and it'll really open up a lot of doors for you. I guess also the other thing I'd say is I've applied to a lot of jobs in my life. I've not gotten all of them. Always let somebody else tell you no. You'd be surprised how far you can get sometimes when you just try, because there's a lot of positions. Cybersecurity, I had no background in it. I had no CS degree, and I could think of a billion reasons to talk myself out of it. But I went and I applied. I explained how I want to address the problem, how to go after things, and people were willing to give me a chance. And they're going to be willing to give you guys chances too. So just try. Don't give up without applying, without trying, but also apply smartly. If you're going to apply for a job, learn what it's about. Tailor your resume for your application. Don't lie, but if you have experience pertinent to what they're doing, highlight it. When you do the interview, make sure that you explain to them why you think you're a good candidate for the position. If you don't feel like it's been described well enough for you to know, ask them to describe the duties and the tasks. I interview a lot of people in my job throughout, you know, a given year, and that's a quick way to suss out the higher priority candidates versus the lower priority ones. Is the ones that actually are interactive, ask compelling questions, and can give good answers on how to approach something. That always goes up in my book. So that's something I would definitely say, work on that skill set, use it, and that'll help you no matter what you end up doing. But I'd love to have you in cybersecurity because we're drowning here. I got a billion alerts and I can't do them. So please.
Well, thank you, Charlie. We're good.